Pokemon Heart Gold and SoulSilver are hands down some of the most incredible Pokemon games ever created. No matter how amazing these games are, the great thing about Pokemon is that you can introduce your own rules to make games that are over a decade old feel new and exciting again. I set out to take new and exciting to the next level, and by next level, I mean make this game as chaotic as I could. In order to achieve this, I completely randomized every encounter, trainer battle, Pokemon stats, abilities, types, movesets, and evolutions. Essentially, we could have a Rayquaza on our team with Sunkern stats, or we could have a Sunkern on our team with Rayquaza stats, and everything in between. And just to make it even more interesting, I decided to attempt this game using hardcore nuzlocke rules. This was honestly the most fun I've had playing Pokemon in a while, so I sincerely hope you enjoy and maybe give this challenge a try for yourself. Without any further ado, here's what happened. I begin by choosing my own name, a power anyone named Keith wishes they had, and we wake up in our bedroom. After a nagging session from our mother, we head over to our neighbor's house where he lets us choose our very own Pokemon. Our options are Ekans, Flygon, and Machop. I go with the obvious choice Flygon, but then again it really doesn't matter considering all the typing, stats, moves, and abilities are completely random. I nickname it Mario, and we're given our first task by Professor Elm. We're instructed to go to Mr. Pokemon's house and retrieve an egg for Professor Elm. I know damn well this guy isn't busy with shit, but we decide to go anyways. Before I leave, I check Mario's stats and they're actually not too bad. Our ability is Sandville, which has very niche uses but could be worse. I make my way to Mr. Pokemon's house and we meet Professor Oak there. He gives us a Pokedex and sends us on our way. After stepping outside, we get a call from Professor Elm saying that he's been robbed. We rush back to the lab to laugh at him but are stopped by a strange red-haired boy. He challenges us to a battle and his Ekans is no match for Mario. After the battle, we steal his ID to see what his name is and he doesn't like that one bit. We report it to the police and our public enemy number 1 is born.
We will name him after the true greatest rival to every living human being. Taxes.
The manhunt for taxes begins, but we can't afford to participate, so instead we head to Route 29 where we can get our first team member. We capture our floor shit and name it Shy Guy because it reminds me of my Shy Guy. He's a fighting normal type with the ability Adaptability. I can get another encounter on Route 30 and this one is a Remoraid. I name it Blooper and it also is a fighting type. Blooper has the ability Solid Rock, which is quite useful, but its stats are worrisome to say the least. The next encounter we find is a Snubbull, but it would rather die than join our team, I guess.
Okay, I guess we don't want Snubbull.
I spend some time leveling up my team before coming across a troubling realization.
Okay, just for reference of how chaotic this is, our Diglett has better base stats than our starter.
I take a quick detour into Dark Cave where we find our next team member Kingdra. I name it Cheep Cheep. My next encounter is on Route 31 and it's a Floatzel. I name it Waluigi. Its ability is No Guard, which would be great if we have one-hit KO attacks, but awful if the opponent does. Before heading to the gym to challenge Faulkner, I take a detour to Sprout Tower to acquire yet another team member. This time it's a Cresselia. I capture it, name it Peach, and she has amazing stats but horrible moves. With our full team of 6 assembled, it's finally time to take on our first gym challenge against Faulkner. Or I guess I should say Man Pie. He leads with Nidoking and we start with Waluigi. I use Dark Void to put it to sleep and use Reflect. It wakes up immediately and uses Doom Desire. I use Flash Cannon and it's not very effective but does massive damage nonetheless. We take a weak Comet Punch and then take out Nidoking with an Icy Wind. We take the Doom Desire attack and it doesn't do too much damage at all. Faulkner's ace is Carvanha and I test the waters with an Icy Wind, but it turns out to be super effective and do about half of its HP. I use Icy Wind once more and somehow it's not enough to take it out. Carvanha uses Blizzard immediately after, and with Waluigi on 11 health, it's enough to take him out and hand us our first KO of the run. I send in Shy Guy and use an Iron Tail, which is more than enough to take out the Carvanha and secure us our first gym badge. After the battle, I can head to Route 32 to find a new team member. It ends up being Rhyhorn and I catch it and name it Kamek. Kamek's stats are definitely underwhelming, but it may be useful for some situations. I capture 4 new team members at the Ruins of Elf, Union Cave, Route 33, and Slowpoke Well. They end up being Luxray, Clefairy, Cherrim, and Staryu. I name them Yoshi, Toad, Petey, and Rosalina respectively. While in Slowpoke Well, we battle Team Rocket and have no issues with any of the fights.
Convenient timing, Kurt. Your legs seem to work now that all the hard work is done.
Our next order of business is to fight Gym Leader Bugsy, aka Man Jimmy, for the second badge. He leads with Pupitar and we send out Toad. We use a Wake Up Slap and are hit with Confusion. I use an Ice Punch and it's super effective but doesn't do much damage. Bugsy switches out Pupitar and sends in Numel. Ice Punch doesn't do anything, so I switch to Kamek. I take a Dropek and it does way more than I would like, but I decide to stay in and use a Stab Draco Meteor. It does decent damage, but after another powerful Super Fang, I'm forced to swap Kamek out. I go with Mario and take a Drill Peck on the switch. It doesn't do much damage, so I counter with Fire Punch and it basically just tickles Numel as it uses Doom Desire. I use Arm Thrust and it's super effective but still isn't enough to take Numel out. We take the Doom Desire attack as Bugsy uses a Super Potion. Another Arm Thrust does about a third of Numel's health and super effective Bug Bite takes Numel into the red. Another Bug Bite takes Numel out. Bugsy sends Pupitar back in and it uses a powerful Confusion as we throw a Fire Punch. We're both deep in the red at this point, so to be safe I swap to Peach. All it takes is one Hammer Arm to take out Pupitar and move Bugsy to his last Pokemon, which is Magikarp. Obviously Magikarp could be incredibly dangerous in this challenge, so we have to be careful here. After some back and forths with Hammer Arm, we use Double Edge and finish Magikarp and Bugsy off. He gives us the Hive Badge and we can finally move on. When trying to leave Azalea Town, we're stopped by the Taxman and challenged to a battle. The battle is quite underwhelming until I run into some inevitable bullshit.
Oh, wait, get crit, yeah.
After saying goodbye to Kamek, we take out the rest of Tax's team and we're finally able to leave Azalea Town.
Kamek, you will be missed.
I head into Elix Forest and find a replacement for Kamek and it ends up being Gliscor. I capture it and name it Wario. The egg we got at the start of the game finally hatches and for some reason I forgot to randomize these encounters, so I do the only thing I can.
You're not randomized, so we can't use you.
As we were heading through the forest once again, I run into some very bad luck against a bug catcher and the chaos of this challenge claims another victim. Just like that, before the third gym, we lose our faithful starter to one of my least favorite Pokemon of all time. In an attempt to make up for the loss, I grab a new team member on Route 34 and it ends up being an Abomasnow. I catch it and name it Daisy. Afterwards, I start to work my way through Goldenrod City Gym before this mega bitch trainer gives us an extremely hard time.
Oh, we keep getting crit. No.
Petey gets taken out on a crit return, and before I even have time to process that loss, this happens.
Oh! No!
I send in Cheep Cheep and can finally take out the fat pink blob of pain.
And here we go. Hopefully this isn't another massacre, but it might be.
Because of those two losses, we go into the battle with Cheep Cheep, Daisy, Peach, Rosalina, Blooper, and Shy Guy. Whitney leads with Claydol and I send out Daisy. I'm hit with an extremely powerful Bullet Seed and hit Claydol with an X-Scissor that does about 2/3 of his HP. Daisy is too low to keep in, so I'm forced to switch to Blooper. He takes a Bullet Seed on the switch and tanks it much better than Daisy. I use a Bug Buzz and it's more than enough to take Claydol out. Whitney sends in her Ace Slacking and hits Blooper with a very powerful Stomp. I use Bug Buzz one more time and it does pitiful damage, so I swap Blooper out. I send in Shy Guy and take another devastating Stomp from Slacking and I'm forced to swap out once again. Cheep Cheep is the next victim of Stomp and it still does over half of my HP. I try to outspeed in order to damage Slacking, but it's still faster than us and takes Cheep Cheep out with Stomp. I go with Peach instead and miss a Hammer Arm before Slacking uses Tailwind. Hammer Arm finally connects and while it's super effective, it barely does any damage and I realize I might be in trouble in this fight.
Oh, that's super effective!
We trade chip damage for a bit until I finally get Slacking into the red and force Whitney to use a super potion. I whittle Slacking down once more until Whitney uses another super potion and I have to rinse and repeat with Hammer Arm. A strong revenge takes us into the red and I'm outsped and hit with Stomp.
Oh no.
This means one of our best Pokemon is gone for the rest of the run. I send in Rosalina to get Slacking into the red with Dragon Rush. We survive a Stomp on 6 HP, but since Slacking is faster than Prime Usain Bolt, he outspeeds and takes out Rosalina with Revenge. Our team is in extremely rough shape, so it looks like it'll take a miracle to win this one. I send out Shy Guy and since we're slower, Stomp KOs easily. I go with Daisy next and luckily a Fire Blast manages to hit first and take Slacking out for good. We finally defeat Whitney, but at the astronomical cost of 4 of our team members.
Oh my god. What a massacre.
After Whitney finishes her tantrum, she gives us the badge and we can escape from this godforsaken gym. The death box is looking way too full compared to my storage box, so I think it's time to go out and acquire some new friends. I head back to Azalea Town to headbutt some trees and we find a Sneasel. I capture it and name it Iggy. I also head back to Violet City, Cherry Grove City, and Newbark Town to capture an Onix, Togetic, and Hitmonchan. I name our new members Wiggler, Luma, and Hammerbro. On my way to National Park, I have some trouble with the random trainers and Daisy falls to a head smash from an Articuno. After the fight, we can grab a new team member and it ends up being Azurill. I name it Baby Peach. In the national park, I find a Chingling, capture it and name it Goomba. Access to Route 36 allows us to capture a Drifloon and I name him Lakitu. Along the way to Ecruteak City, I can capture a Wigglytuff on Route 37. It's nicknamed Birdo for obvious reasons. While in Ecruteak City, I can headbutt a tree and find another team member in Flaffy. I catch it and name it Nabbit. In Burn Tower, I can capture a Graveler, so I do so and name it Bob-omb. Right after, we are faced once again with Taxes. He challenges us to a battle and starts with Suicune and immediately hits Birdo with a quad-effective Flame Wheel, and I'm forced to watch yet another team member and friend get taken from me. I swap to Bob-omb and hit Suicune with a Wing Attack, but this thing is pretty bulky and it doesn't do much damage. I use Lovely Kiss and put Suicune to sleep for the time being. I swap to Hammer Bro and use Air Cutter, which does massive damage but isn't quite enough to take Suicune out. Suicune wakes up and uses Reflect, so we're free to take it out with Air Cutter. I easily sweep the rest of his team with Hammer Bro and move on to my next fight with Gym Leader Morty. He leads with Chingling and I send out Bob-omb. I know Chingling is extremely weak since we have one, so taking it out should be no issue. All Chingling uses is Splash, so we burn one of Morty's potions and take Chingling out with Wing Attacks. Next up is Kabuto, and I luckily take it out with one hit with a super effective Wing Attack. Morty's next Pokemon is Glalie, and it too goes down in one hit to a Wing Attack. His last Pokemon is Persian, and a Wing Attack is enough to get Persian almost to half HP. We use Lovely Kiss to put it to sleep and switch to Yoshi. Persian wakes up immediately and confuses Yoshi with Teeter Dance, but amazingly we break through confusion and take Persian out with critical hit Chatter. That's Morty taken out and the Fog Badge acquired. On Route 38, we can find a new team member in Magnezone. I capture it and name it Toadsworth. On Route 39, we catch a Scizor and name it Diddy Kong. I make it to Olivine City and take a quick break to go fishing where I find a Meditite. I capture it and name it Koopa. I begin to make my way to Cianwood City so we can challenge the gym leader Chuck. On the way, we find a new team member, the first of which is a Chinchou, and I name him Blooper as well. I guess I completely forgot I already used this name. Sorry, Remoraid. We also catch a Shroomish and name it Bill. Before battling the gym, I'm able to evolve Blooper 2.0 and it turns into exactly what you'd expect. Alright, first evolution. No. I mean, it doesn't mean anything, but... Right after, we also evolve Bill into Hariyama, Nabbit into Walrein, OG Blooper into Bronzong, and Lakitu into Breloom. We're finally prepared to fight the next gym leader Chuck, so we head to the gym and confront him. He sends out Chingling and we lead with Lakitu. Once again, I have the advantage of knowing which type I'm against, so I use a super effective Sucker Punch. It doesn't do much damage at all and I take a weak Weather Ball in return. I use an Aeroblast next, and since Lakitu's special attack is much more favorable, Chingling is taken out. Chuck's ace is Blaziken and I keep Lakitu in for another Aeroblast. It does about half and we're hit with a Stun Spore. The next turn we break through Paralysis and almost take Blaziken out with Aeroblast, but it survives on super low health and heals a bit with a Citrus Berry. Lakitu is within crit range, so I decide to swap in Blooper. I take a super effective Hammer Arm and throw a Shadow Ball. It doesn't do nearly as much as I'd hoped and Blooper is immediately stunned again. I swap into Nabbit and Chuck uses a Hyper Potion. I clue into the fact that our other Blooper has more favorable typing, so I immediately swap into it. We take a not very effective Hammer Arm and I use a Surf, which is super effective and does massive damage. Chuck uses his second Hyper Potion and another Surf is enough to take Blaziken into the red. We tank one more weak Hammer Arm and are free to take Blaziken out with Surf. That's Chuck defeated and the Storm Badge acquired. After the fight, I evolve Goomba into Corsola and head back to Olivine Lighthouse to give Jasmine the secret potion. Once the Ampharos is healed, she heads back to the gym where we can finally challenge her. She leads with Cielo and we send out Yoshi. We use a Magical Leaf and it does decent damage for a not very effective attack. I use Chatter next and it gets a crit, which is more than enough to take out Cielo. Next, Jasmine sends out Hippopotas and she outspeeds and puts us to sleep with Spore. Luckily, we wake up on the next turn and hit Hippopotas with a Magical Leaf. It's also not very effective, so I try a Chatter instead and it ends up being super effective, so it's plenty enough to take out the Hippo. Next is Blastoise and I decide to keep Yoshi in for now. A Chatter doesn't do nearly as much as I would like and a super effective Hammer Arm gets Yoshi too low to remain in. I swap to Luma and eat a weak Hammer Arm. We go for Fly and it also does minimal damage. I try a Close Combat instead and it does quite a bit better. I trade Hammer Arms for Close Combats until Jasmine burns her Hyper Potions and I'm forced to swap to Lakitu. Hammer Arm is quite weak, so I stay in and use Aeroblast. It still doesn't do a ton of damage, so I try a Hyper Voice instead and it almost takes Blastoise into the red. I switch into Diddy Kong and use a Gunk Shot, which is finally enough to take Blastoise out and earn us the Mineral Badge from Jasmine. Almost immediately after the fight, Yoshi gets ambushed by a wild Regirock and is destroyed.
No, Yoshi, what?
This challenge definitely always keeps you on your toes, that's for sure. I run to the Lake of Rage hoping the shiny Gyarados is randomized, but unfortunately it's not, but I capture it anyways just so I can give it a fitting name. We meet Lance afterwards and he wants us to help us investigate some suspicious activity in the Mahogany gift shop. Before leaving the Lake of Rage, we can get another team member and it ends up being a Torchic. I capture it and name it Bowser. I can evolve it right away and it turns into a Venusaur. Inside the gift shop, Lance commits a felony against this poor employee.
Probably dead now, right?
We head into the Team Rocket HQ and begin our search for wrongdoers. It's not long before a Team Rocket grunt takes exception to Nabbit and kicks it in the face, taking it out.
What?
I get through the rest of the hideout and find myself face to face with a gas man, Petrel. He challenges us to a battle and he absolutely stunk, so I'll spare you having to watch us annihilate him. Before we can destroy Team Rocket's evil machine, we are challenged by Gentleman Kate. Lance decides to help us in this fight, and of course he has the god of all Pokemon, Bidoof. It's not a particularly difficult fight, it takes a few minutes for us to take out all their Pokemon, but after the fight is over, we destroy Team Rocket's machine for good. With Team Rocket dealt with for now, we can head to the gym to fight Pryce. He leads with Sand Slash and we send out Bob-omb. I go for a wing attack and it's not very effective, but I get a crit and it does huge damage regardless. We take a weak Avalanche and fire off Luster Purge, but it doesn't do much at all. Shortly after, Sandslash uses a head smash and ends up taking itself out with recoil. Next up is Girafarig and I hit it with a wing attack. I'm subsequently hit with a Magnet Bomb and it gets Bob-omb so low that I switch to Bowser to use Payback, which is super effective and more than enough to take Girafarig out. Pryce's last Pokemon is Absol and I keep Bowser in and use Bounce. It connects and is super effective, and with the Citrus Berries healing, Pryce won't use a potion and we're free to take Absol out with another Bounce. That was a super easy fight and that's 7 badges down and only 1 more to go. Before we can take on the final gym leader, we need to head back to Goldenrod City to defeat Team Rocket for the last time. I switch into my undercover uniform and head into the tower. Taxes comes out of nowhere and luckily he doesn't want to battle at the moment, so we can just forget about him for now. I make my way through some admittedly difficult fights on my way to the top, and before too long we finally manage to get Baby Peach to evolve into Spinarak.
Oh, there's shit!
One of the benefits of this challenge is that we can keep evolving our Pokemon until they reach any final stage, so we can basically just keep re-rolling their stats until we get something good. So with that being said, we try to evolve again and end up getting a Glameow the second time. Its stats were slightly better, but still not exactly what I'm looking for, so I go for another try. I end up getting a Chansey and its stats are much better, so I'll stick around for now. Shortly after Chansey joins us, we make it to the director's office and we meet our old friend Petrel. He leads with Execute and we send out Baby Peach. Although now it looks more like if Kirby ate Baby Peach. We use an Ice Punch and are hit with a weak Stomp. Another Ice Punch and Triple Kick is more than enough to scramble the eggs. Sorry about that one, I had to. Next up is Tyranitar and it does massive damage with Leaf Storm, so I switch into Toadsworth. Leaf Storm barely tickles us, so we're free to use Dark Pulse. It does a bit of damage before Petrel swaps to Ho-Oh. I hit it with a Comet Punch and it does pitiful damage. He swaps out Ho-Oh and sends in Shellos, but a couple of Dark Pulses is plenty to take it out. Petrel switches back to Ho-Oh and a few discharges gets Toadsworth quite low and paralyzes. I swap back to Bowser and use a powerful Mega Kick. One more Mega Kick is enough to take out Ho-Oh and Petrel sends out Spinda. We hit it with Aurora Beam, which does about a third. A super effective Payback takes out Spinda on the next turn. Petrel moves back to Tyranitar and I use Bounce, which isn't quite enough to take it out. That's when we're hit with a Spark and a quick Leaf Storm that is too much for Bowser to handle and he is taken out.
No, Bowser!
As Bowser goes down, I send in Iggy and easily take out Tyranitar with an Aqua Tail. Petrel's last Pokemon is Electivire and I keep Iggy in. I use Dragon Rush and it doesn't do a whole lot as Electivire raises its defense with Withdraw. An Aqua Tail brings him into the yellow and we're hit with a Nightshade. A super effective Ice Shard isn't even enough to KO, and luckily we avoid a crit from Electivire and can take it out on the next turn with another Ice Shard. Petrel gives us the basement key as a reward and we can go free the kidnapped CEO. Somehow Taxes still finds us in the basement and we're challenged to another battle. This one was very easy despite him having a Regice and Arceus on his team. We move on to our main reason for being down here, which is to find our missing person. We find the director after a few minutes and he gives us the key card to access the elevator in the radio tower. I find a choice band in the basement, which will be huge for the rest of this run.
Oh, what? That's so lucky.
On our way back to the radio tower, Baby Peach evolves for the last time, and this time it's a Lunatone. Our new stats are worse than Chansey's, so that's a bit unfortunate, but Natural Cure is a great ability, so it sort of balances out. We battle Proton one more time, and this fight is a snooze fest, so it's on to Ariana.
Get serious, Anne. You suck.
She's also quite easy with the exception of a very close call with Hammer Bro. After sending Ariana packing, we're free to head to the observation deck to battle the new leader of Team Rocket, Archer, aka Joe. He leads with Camera Up and we send out Hammer Bro. We use Earth Power and it does minimal damage, so I triple kick instead, which is super effective and gets Camera Up down to just over half. I swap into Luma and we're immediately put to sleep with Dark Void. We wake up on the next turn and hit Camera Up with a powerful close combat, which is almost enough to take it out. Archer then swaps out Camera Up and sends in Kabuto. I connect with a close combat on it and it's not very effective, so I swap into Blooper. We tank a takedown and hit it with a Shadow Ball before Kabuto heals back to full HP. I spam Dragon Claws while Kabuto slacks off until we finally hit it enough to take it out. Camera Up is sent back in and it's on like 1 HP, so a Dragon Claw is plenty to get rid of it. Archer's last Pokemon is Steelix and a Dragon Claw does about half of its health in one hit. Steelix knows Heat Wave, which is very bad for us as it does just enough damage to KO Blooper. I take a quick moment to mourn our glorious red monster before swapping into Baby Peach. I use Triple Kick and it doesn't do too much before we're clobbered by another Heat Wave. Oh, you fucking... I'm forced to switch out again and I send in our defensive tank Luma. Steelix uses a weak Constrict, then a devastating Body Slam. I retaliate with a close combat and it's more than enough to KO the Steelix and earn us the W against Archer and Team Rocket. Archer leaves and I rework my team to account for all of our losses. I evolve Meditite into Fira when he has unbelievable stats and huge power but horrendous defense, which makes him quite risky to use. I enter the Ice Path where I get a new team member, Houndoom. I capture it and name it Monty. I make it out of Ice Path and into Blackthorn City. I take a moment to look over my team for the final stretch of the game and it's looking pretty nasty.
Oh my god, good stats. You have great defense and great speed, pretty mid special attack, but nobody can touch you. You have great attack, you have just solid stats in general. Pretty slow, but other than that, even Steven. You have the most insane defense I've ever seen in my entire life. Your attack's pretty good, your special defense is good, you are slow as shit though. You are fast as shit, have insane defense, insane attack, decent special attack, and honestly not even that bad. Jeez, I should just poison you going into every battle, shouldn't I? Oh, Hammer Bro, you are insane. And Monty, honestly, not even bad. Pretty balanced stats too. Great special attack. I bring the new and improved team to the final gym where we can challenge Claire. I had an amazing foolproof plan going into this and failure wasn't an option at all. We are just going to simply use a ground plate held Houndoom using Judgment. And we are likely going to sweep your entire team. Okay, new plan. We are not gonna do that. Holy shit. I send in Koopa and try Psycho Cut, but of course it doesn't affect the Minun. I swap to Iggy and use an Aqua Tail, which does about half to Minun. Claire heals with a Hyper Potion and gets hit by an Aqua Tail before swapping into Kricketot. It goes for Dive and we stay in to tank it as we're a Water Ice type. Our accuracy was too low and I couldn't get any attacks to land, so we swap out Iggy into Luma. We tank a few weak dives and a single close combat is more than enough to take Kricketot out. Claire sends in Combee and we hit it with another close combat. It's not very effective but still does half of Combee's HP. I swap out to Koopa and Combee sets up Barrier. I use a Psycho Cut and it takes out Combee no problem. I'm still scared of this Minun, so I switch out Koopa and send in Hammer Bro. A single Air Cutter is quite sufficient to take out Minun, and Claire sends in her last Pokemon, Magmortar. I use an Air Cutter and it barely does any damage. Magmortar paralyzes us with Glare, which is very good as it activates our Guts ability. I use a Triple Kick as Magmortar misses a Fissure. This scares me a ton because if it connects with Fissure, it's an automatic one-hit KO. I don't want to risk my best Pokemon, so I swap into Koopa. Magmortar misses another Fissure and I hit it with a not very effective Psycho Cut. It heals with a Citrus Berry and I swap out again, this time into Toadsworth. We get hit with a few weak Aurora Beams, then retaliate with a Sleep Powder. I use a Comet Punch and it doesn't do a whole lot. Magmortar wakes up and we use Dark Pulse. It still does pitiful damage and unfortunately the inevitable happens. It was gonna hit at some point. Odds were it was gonna hit at some point. And unfortunately Toadsworth had to be the one to take it. I send in Iggy, and an Aqua Tail is enough to take Magmortar into the red. Claire uses a full restore, and Iggy has some trouble breaking through paralysis, so I end up switching to Hammer Bro and take a weak Aurora Beam on the switch. A triple kick does about a third, so I use Earth Power and it brings Magmortar to just below half. Another triple kick brings it to extremely low HP, and one more is enough to take it out. That means Claire is defeated and we've officially collected all 8 gym badges. She also throws a tantrum after losing, and we head to the Dragon Shrine to take some kind of test. I go surfing to find a replacement team member, and we find an Electivire. I name him DK and continue on to the shrine. We take a strange test which determines if we get the gym badge and somehow we pass. Claire finally shows up and grants us the Rising badge. Afterwards, in the Whirl Islands, we find another team member and it ends up being a Gulpin. I name it Bowser Jr. and evolve it to Illumise right away. Its stats are not that good, so I'm not sure how much use this thing will see at all. In order to encounter Lugia, we need to fight all of the Kimono girls in Ecruteak City. The first battle is extremely easy, but the second one scares me a ton when I see our opponent. We hit Hitmonchan with a close combat and it puts us to sleep. I swap into Koopa and it unfortunately takes an extremely powerful takedown. No! I switch to DK and get put to sleep right away again. After a couple insane takedowns, I'm forced to switch out again. I send in my own Hammer Bro and take out the Hitmonchan with Air Cutter. The rest of the fights are quite effortless with the exception of a tanky Togekiss, but we manage to take it out. We are rewarded with the title belt and are told to meet the girls at the Whirl Islands. We watch some cult ritual and Lugia is summoned. Since it's a static encounter, it's not randomized and we take it out and move on with our lives. I begin my trek into Kanto by heading into the Tojo Falls and get a new team member. I catch an Apom and name it Dixie Kong. I venture on fighting lots of trainers along the way, and unfortunately we run into some trouble right near the entrance to Victory Road.
Again, just vaporized. Just vaporized.
Luckily, DK is the only casualty on our journey and we make it into Victory Road, where we find our final encounter before the Elite Four. I capture the Shedinja and name it Boo. It still has Wonder Guard, so something must have gone wrong with the randomizer. At any rate, this thing is horrible in a challenge like this, so I don't expect that it'll last very long. At the end of Victory Road, the Tax Man catches up with us for the last time and we have our final showdown. He leads with Goldeen and we send out Dixie Kong. We use a Mega Punch off the bat and it does just less than half. Goldeen sets up with Amnesia and we use Strength on the next turn, which puts Goldeen into the red. We take a weak Secret Power and take out the Goldeen with Strength. Next up is Shelgon and we keep Dixie Kong in and use a Mega Punch, which doesn't do a ton of damage. We take a weak Icy Wind, and because of the speed drop I switch to Hammer Bro. We eat a weak Silver Wind on the switch and then hit Shelgon with an Earth Power. It does a ton of damage but isn't quite enough to KO. Shelgon uses Sleep Powder and Hammer Bro takes a mid-battle snooze. We manage to wake up on the next turn and KO the Shelgon with Earth Power. Next up is Torchic and it outspeeds and hits us with Fire Blast. It's super effective and my life flashes before my eyes. No, 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 no. I immediately swap Hammer Bro out and Wiggler makes his first appearance of the run. Torchic uses a powerful Fire Blast again and we're forced to swap out to Boo. And my expectations were definitely too high for this guy. Taxus sends out Frostlass and we hit it with a disgraceful low kick. Taxus immediately swaps out Frostlass and sends in Sand Slash. We paralyze it with Stun Spore right away and before long we're smoked with a Shadow Punch that spells the end of Boo's short run with us. I send out Luma instead and hit Sand Slash with a close combat. It ends up being super effective and taking it out in one hit. Taxus goes back to Torchic and we also hit it with a close combat, which is a KO as well, luckily. Frostlass comes back out and I send Dixie Kong back in. I use a Mega Punch and it does a ton of damage, but we end up being just shy of the KO. However, one more Mega Punch is plenty to take the Frostlass out on the next turn. Taxus sends out his last Pokemon, Mime Jr., and I stick with Dixie Kong. We outspeed and use Mega Punch and it's close to taking it out, but this thing really can't touch us, so one more is all it takes. I defeat Mime Jr. and win us the fight. Taxus leaves and we can move on to the Pokemon League at long last. The team we will be bringing to the Elite Four consists of Wiggler with Heal Bell, Tri-Attack, Mirror Shot, and Petal Dance, Hammer Bro with Dive, Sludge Bomb, Triple Kick, and Earth Power, Iggy with Hail, Surf, Dragon Rush, and Blizzard, Lakitu with Aeroblast, Hyper Voice, Reflect, and Cross Poison, Looper with Assurance, Brave Bird, Strength, and Swords Dance, and finally Wario with Toxic Spikes, Draco Meteor, Shadow Force, and Sludge Bomb. I honestly have super high hopes for this team, so without further ado, we begin the fight against the first Elite Four member, Will. He leads with Hypno and we send out Wiggler. Hypno uses Charge and we hit it with Mirror Shot that does a little less than half. Hypno uses Charge again and I go for Tri-Attack, which doesn't affect Hypno, so we know it's a Ghost type. I swap out into Blooper and I'm hit with a Feather Dance before I can use Assurance, which does basically nothing. I'm hit with a weak Brick Break and begin setting up Swords Dances. Once at +6 attack, I hit Hypno with an Assurance and this time it's more than enough to destroy it. Will's second Pokemon is Smeargle and I keep Blooper in for now. I use Assurance and it annihilates Smeargle in one hit. Next up is Licky Licky and I decide to use Brave Bird. We're hit with quite a bit of recoil, but the attack is plenty to take Licky Licky out. Will's next Pokemon is Granbull and it starts it's raining due to its drizzle. I swap into Wario and Granbull uses Focus Energy. I try to use Sludge Bomb, but it doesn't affect the Granbull. We're hit with a weak Dragon Pulse, and on the next turn use Toxic Spikes. I'm hit with Dragon Pulse again and try using Draco Meteor, which does pretty much nothing. After another Dragon Pulse, I decide to switch to Iggy. Dragon Pulse crits on the switch but doesn't do any concerning amount of damage. I use Surf and it finally does quite a bit to Granbull. I use Hail to ensure that Blizzard cannot miss on the next turn. It doesn't do close to the amount of damage I need it to, and Iggy is pretty low from Vine Whip, so I switch to Wiggler. Granbull gets a slow with Dragon Pulse and I use Petal Dance, which still does brutal damage. Somehow I haven't clued into the fact that this thing is a steel type, so hopefully we figure that out soon. Will uses a full restore and I swap Wiggler out for Hammer Bro. I try to use a triple kick, but it doesn't affect Granbull because of course it's a ghost type, so since Hammer Bro has a choice band, we have to swap out yet again. I send in Lakitu and eat a Dragon Pulse before I can use an Aero Blast. It does basically no damage, so I swap back to Hammer Bro and finally smarten up and use Earth Power. It does a ton of damage, and one more Earth Power is enough to take it out. Will's last Pokemon is a Dialga, and it gets poisoned from Toxic Spikes. I use Earth Power and we get a crit, but it's not very effective. Dialga uses Dragon Dance twice, meaning it's quite scary now, so I swap out Hammer Bro and send in Wario. Dialga is now at +5 speed and attack, so we could easily take out the rest of our team, but luckily we get a Sludge Bomb off and it still doesn't take it out. We get it into the red, but Will uses another full restore and poison is taken away as well. Oh my god, we got a crit and a poison! After some insane luck, we're finally hit with an attack, but Dialga's attack stat must be ass because it does awful damage, and we're free to take it out in a couple of turns with Draco Meteor and poison damage. That means Will is taken out and we can move on to Koga. Koga spews some garbage real quick before we can finally begin the battle. He sends out Mamoswine and we start with Wario. We set up a Toxic Spikes and Mamoswine uses Minimize. I go for Sludge Bomb, but the Mamoswine is immune to poison, meaning it's at least part steel type. We take a weak Icy Wind in the meantime before I decide to switch in Hammer Bro. Mamoswine uses Minimize once more and we miss an Earth Power. We miss a couple more Earth Powers before one finally connects and does its entire hell. Koga's next Pokemon is Meganium and it gets poisoned on the switch, so we stay in with Hammer Bro. I use an Earth Power and it too takes out Meganium in one hit. Next up is Sudowoodo and I try Earth Power again, but it doesn't affect the sausage, so we know it's part Flying type. It uses Meditate to raise its attack and we swap Hammer Bro out. Since the opponent's held items aren't randomized, the Sudowoodo is holding Black Sludge, which damages every Pokemon except Grimer and Muck, so this guy is just going to take damage after each turn, which is great for us. I send in Iggy and set up Hail as soon as I can. I use 100% accurate Blizzard on the next turn, and since I know Sudowoodo is a flying type, this takes it out easily. Koga's next Pokemon is Feraligatr, and I decide to just use another Blizzard right away. It too is super effective, and Feraligatr goes down. Koga sends in his last Pokemon, which is an Arceus, and I stick with Blizzard for now. It doesn't do too much, and Arceus uses Curse. I try Surf instead, and it does similar damage to Blizzard as Arceus uses Curse again. I use Surf one more time, and while it's not enough to KO on its own, the poison damage ends up finishing off Arceus right after, and we have officially won the fight. Koga allows us to move on, and we are faced with the third member of the Elite Four, Bruno. Bruno accepts our challenge, and the battle begins. He leads with a Darkrai, and I send out Wario. I use the same strategy as last time and throw a Toxic Spikes. Darkrai uses Submission right after, and it does about a quarter of our health. Darkrai isn't affected by the Sandstorm, so I decide to switch Wario out for Iggy. We take a super effective Submission, then use Surf, which is super effective and does massive damage. I tank another heavy Submission before I'm finally able to take Darkrai out with one more Surf. Bruno sends out C-Dot and we swap back to Wario. We get paralyzed on the switch, so I send out Hammer Bro instead. I go for Dive with Hammer Bro and it connects on the next turn, taking out the C-Dot in one hit. Next up is yet another Granbull, and we have to use Dive again due to the choice band. A super effective Dive is more than powerful enough to KO the Granbull right away. Bruno sends out Corsola next, and I know this thing is weak as shit, so I annihilate it with Dive as well. Bruno's last Pokemon is Charizard and it gets poisoned on the switch. I just use Dive once again because if it ain't broke, don't fix it, and luckily it's super effective and Hammer Bro has yet another one-hit KO. This means Bruno is easily defeated and we can look towards the last member of the Elite Four, Karen. I accidentally tell Karen the same rules apply to her as everyone else and she completely loses her shit and threatens to tell the HOA, so we quickly step in and battle her. She leads with Clefable and we stick with our same strategy and start with Wario. I send out my Toxic Spikes and Clefable uses Zap Cannon, which gets a lucky crit. We get paralyzed as well, but a not very effective Sludge Bomb does more damage than I thought to Clefable. We end up getting the poison on Clefable and we get rid of our paralysis with Shed Skin. I use Shadow Force and it does almost enough to take out Clefable, but luckily the poison can finish it off instead. Karen sends in Leafeon and I swap to Iggy. Leafeon uses Psycho Boost and we take the hit extremely well. I set up Hail next and we're hit with a weak Fury Cutter. I use Blizzard on the next turn and it does decent damage for not being very effective. I try Surf instead and it's powerful enough to KO the Leafeon. Karen sends out Kadabra and it instantly gets poisoned. Fortunately for us, this bum has the worst ability of all time, Slow Start, so it's a free KO for us. Karen's next Pokemon is Deoxys and I use Blizzard
Blizzard on it immediately. It's not very effective, but we get a crit and a lucky freeze anyways. I take advantage of the frozen Deoxys and use a Surf, which does respectable damage. Deoxys remains frozen for another turn, so we use Surf again before it thaws out and hits us with Cotton Spore. Here I swap to Hammer Bro and Karen uses a full restore. I use Dive with Hammer Bro and it does about a third to Deoxys. I use Dive once more and take it into the deep yellow. Luckily, Deoxys was unable to hit us with any damaging moves and another Dive takes it out. Karen sends out Glaceon next and I elect to stick with a Choice Band Dive. I get a crit and it deals massive damage to Glaceon, meaning we take it out and officially defeat the Elite Four without any casualties at all. As we take our final steps into Lance's chamber, I reflect on my death box and vow to win this championship for all the Pokemon jammed so tightly in that little rectangle. We say our final words to Lance and the battle finally begins. Lance leads with a Heatran and we send in Wario. He uses a Seed Bomb and we set up our Toxic Spikes. Heatran outspeeds with the Dragon Claw, nearly takes us to half HP. We counter with Sludge Bomb and it does a ton of damage. We're hit with another Dragon Claw and our next Sludge Bomb takes out Heatran. Lance's next Pokemon is Fearow and that's extremely scary because we know that it has huge power. I swap into my bulkiest defensive team member, which is Hammer Bro, and as Fearow uses its next move, my heart absolutely drops. There's no way in hell we'd be able to tank a hit from a super effective, huge power close combat, and I'm forced to sit by and watch one of my most trusted team members fall. No, our best Pokemon! I send out Wiggler in replacement and we're forced to take another close combat. I sit looking at my screen, utterly stunned as Wiggler 2 falls to the wrath of Fearow. So after 2 sacrifices, the only damage we've done to Fearow is 2 turns worth of poison, so I try to send out my fastest Pokemon, Blooper. This thing is at -2 defense and special defense, so I predict that any physical move should take it out. I use Brave Bird and pray. Amazingly, it's super effective and more than enough to take the Fearow out. Next up from Lance is Empoleon. It too gets poisoned on the switch as we set up Swords Dance with Blooper. We take a relatively weak Bubble Beam, then fire off another Swords Dance. I take another Bubble Beam before using Assurance, which does a decent bit of damage. Empoleon heals with a Citrus Berry and we decide to risk it all and go for Brave Bird, but it doesn't quite do enough to KO. Of course, Empoleon knows Roost and heals back most of its health. At this point, I decide to swap into Iggy and Empoleon heals back to full HP with Roost. I set up a and use Blizzard on the next turn, which ends up being super effective and deals big damage. Poison damage takes Empoleon into the red, so this prompts Lance to use a full restore. I trade Blizzards and Roosts with Empoleon until I'm out of PP and have to switch to Surf. It's not very effective this time and Empoleon uses Roost once again. I decide that Iggy has done enough and Lakitu makes his first appearance of the battle. I tank a couple of weak Bubble Beams, then use a Cross Poison. It's super effective, but the damage output is awful, so I start another painful process of spamming Cross Poisons and Aeroblast until hopefully one poisons, but we end up whittling Empoleon down to low red HP instead. Thankfully, Lance doesn't use a full restore and one more Cross Poison is enough to finally KO the Penguin. Lance's next Pokemon is Charmander and it gets poisoned upon entry to the battle. I decide to risk it and use an Aeroblast right away, which deals big damage and puts Charmander into the red. Charmander then uses a super effective Shockwave, and since we're already at low HP, Lakitu goes down as well. I send Iggy back in and Lance uses his last full restore to bring Charmander back to full health. We use Surf as soon as we can, it does just less than half to Charmander. We outspeed and move again and Charmander is back to extremely low HP. We're then hit with a super effective Shockwave and thankfully it does barely any damage, which means that one more Surf takes out Charmander. Lance's second to last Pokemon is Lickitung and it gets poisoned right away. I use Surf with Iggy and it's not very effective, so it does minimal damage. We then get hit by a Stone Edge and with a crit it does some significant damage to Iggy. Poison takes Lickitung into the yellow and I decide to switch to Blooper. I take another Stone Edge right away, but it doesn't KO and I go for a Strength. I get an insanely lucky crit and KO the Lickitung. This means we're on to Lance's final Pokemon and it ends up being so disgustingly weak. Just gotta stall. We just gotta stall. And stall we don't. Right away, Torkoal hits us with a Mirror Shot and it KOs my pal Blooper. We only have 2 Pokemon left and they're both way weaker than I'd like, so I decide to go with Wario. Instead of attacking, Torkoal goes for an Iron Defense and we use Shadow Force. The Shadow Force does jack shit and Torkoal uses Secret Power. It brings us down to 18 HP and I go for a Draco Meteor. I watch Torkoal's HP with an entirely full diaper and amazingly it crits. Somehow we've done it. Oh my god, we did it. Oh my god. That was a hard fight. That was a hard fight, man. Great.
great champion fight. I'm glad it wasn't too easy and we just steamrolled them.
We make our way back to the Hall of Fame and take one final look at the team that won us this challenge. Obviously, one of the best parts of this game is the extensive post-game. You can go through all the Kanto gym leaders and battle the ultimate boss, Red. This video's already gone on long enough, so if you're interested in seeing the whole post-game to this, please leave a comment below and I'll try and get that out for you. Thank you so much for watching. I had so much fun making this. This was an awesome game, awesome rules, and I highly recommend you try it for yourself. And with that, I hope to see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.